"Don't cry, I brought your mom," whispered the 10-year-old foster kid. The nurse gasped in disbelief. What would you do if a quiet 10-year-old foster kid suddenly whispered something that stopped a nurse in her tracks? It was a chilly morning in Cleveland, Ohio, not cold enough to freeze the river, but sharp enough to make people pull their coats tighter. Outside the busy pediatric ward of Mercy General Hospital, the usual buzz filled the air. Family members pacing the halls, nurses rushing between rooms, machines softly beeping in the background. His hoodie was a little too big, sleeves covering his hands, scuffed sneakers barely holding together. Tyler didn't complain. He didn't call attention to himself. He was just there, observing, waiting, like he had a secret no one else knew. Nurse Angela Matthews glanced over from her desk, tired from a long night shift. She barely noticed Tyler until he looked up suddenly, eyes steady, voice soft but clear. "Don't cry, I brought your mom." The words cut through the noise. Angela's breath hitched, her pen paused midair. No one had expected that. The woman in the hospital bed, Sarah Lawson, had been unconscious for days, her family shattered and helpless. But Tyler's quiet promise was like a sudden spark in the darkness. The nurse's disbelief was real, but so was the hope that maybe, just maybe, this foster kid knew something that no one else did. Tyler Reed wasn't like most kids you'd see in a hospital waiting area. His dark brown hair curled just enough to peek out from under his faded gray hoodie, and his eyes, deep, thoughtful eyes, held a quiet resilience that seemed far beyond his 10 years. His hands, small but calloused, gripped a worn-out comic book, the pages soft and dog-eared from constant flipping. He wasn't just passing time. Tyler was absorbing everything. The hushed conversations, the worried glances, the restless footsteps echoing down sterile corridors. Every so often, he'd glance at the door to Sarah's room, the door he wasn't allowed to enter. Nearby, Nurse Angela Matthews adjusted her scrubs and wiped the beads of sweat from her forehead. Mid-30s, with streaks of silver in her chestnut hair and eyes that had seen too much pain, she carried the weight of every patient like a silent promise. The hospital was more than a workplace. It was a battleground, and Angela was on the front lines, often feeling powerless against the suffering she witnessed. Then there was Sarah Lawson, the woman lying inside that room. Once full of laughter and light, Sarah's face was pale and fragile, her breathing shallow beneath the hospital monitors. The accident had changed everything in an instant. Her husband Mark's strained jaw and restless pacing told the story of a man who barely slept. Yet Tyler, sitting quietly just feet away, carried a quiet hope. He wasn't just a foster kid lost in the system. He was someone who'd been through his own battles and carried secrets that few could understand. In his heart, he held a promise, one that no one else had dared speak aloud. Mark Lawson was standing just outside the hospital room, his fingers trembling slightly as he checked his watch for the third time in 10 minutes. His usually sharp suit hung loosely, wrinkled from sleepless nights and worry. His eyes were fixed on the door, but his mind was miles away, caught in the whirlwind of fear and hopelessness. Tyler noticed him right away. The tension in Mark's shoulders, the way his jaw clenched and unclenched like he was trying to hold himself together. Most people avoided the man, too caught up in their own pain to reach out. But Tyler had a way of seeing through walls. Gathering every ounce of courage, Tyler stood up, clutching his comic book tightly. He took a slow, steady step toward Mark, who barely noticed the boy at first. Tyler's voice came out soft but unwavering. "Mr. Lawson?" Mark stopped, his eyes narrowing as he turned slowly to face the boy. The hospital's fluorescent lights caught the exhaustion in his face. I don't know you, kid." Tyler swallowed, feeling the weight of the moment. "I know where your wife is," he said, voice steady as stone. Mark blinked, disbelief flashing across his features. "What are you talking about?" "Don't cry. I brought your mom." It wasn't a joke. There was no desperation in his tone, just a quiet certainty that caught Mark off guard. For a second, the man's world seemed to freeze, his breath caught in his throat. The nurse nearby, Angela, heard the words too. She looked up from her clipboard, her eyes widening. No one expected a foster kid sitting quietly in the corner to say something so impossible, so hopeful. Mark's hands clenched into fists, the fight between hope and disbelief raging in his eyes. You're serious?" Tyler nodded, tucking the comic book under his arm. I'm serious. Mark's heart pounded fiercely as he stared at Tyler. A part of him wanted to believe the boy, that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this nightmare. But years of pain and disappointment held him back like an invisible chain. He took a shaky breath, trying to steady his racing thoughts. How could you possibly know? Mark asked, voice thick with doubt. Where's my wife? Is she really alive? Tyler's eyes held steady, but behind that calm exterior, the boy wrestled with his own fears. This was bigger than anything he'd ever faced. I can't explain it all right now, he said carefully. But I've seen her. She's safe. I just need you to trust me. Mark's mind spun. Trust a kid? Someone he barely knew? The logical part screamed no, but the raw, desperate father inside clung to every word. He glanced around. Angela, the nurse, watched silently, her expression unreadable. Mark took a slow step forward, then stopped, the conflict tearing through him. Could he risk opening his heart again, only to be shattered? The next few days were a blur of quiet testing. Tyler kept his distance, but found ways to show Mark small signs, notes left by his wife in places only she could have known, whispered hints about places she loved. Each clue was a fragile thread of hope, yet Mark wrestled with his skepticism. Sometimes he found himself staring at Tyler, searching for any sign of deception. Other times, when no one was looking, he allowed himself a brief moment of faith. He watched the boy closely, his unwavering calm, the careful way he spoke, the strange certainty in his eyes. Mark's nights became restless, torn between the desire to believe and the fear of being crushed again. Doubt whispered poison in his ears, but Tyler's presence was a stubborn light cutting through the darkness. The testing phase was slow and painful. Each step forward met with hesitation, every hopeful sign shadowed by caution. But deep down, Mark felt something stirring, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, miracles could still happen. As days turned into a week, Mark's walls began to crack. Tyler's quiet confidence and the small clues he left stirred a fragile hope in Mark's battered heart. He started to share pieces of his pain, the endless nights wondering where Emily was, the guilt gnawing at him for not being able to protect her, the ache of seeing his daughters grow without their mother. Tyler listened with a patience that surprised Mark, never rushing, never judging. But just when Mark allowed himself to believe, the shadows returned. One evening, the hospital called with news. Emily's trail had gone cold. The lead they had been following turned into a dead end. Mark felt the weight of despair crashing down, heavier than before. The hollow silence of the phone, after the nurse's hesitant words, was louder than any scream. Tyler stood silently beside him, the flicker of hope dimming in his eyes. Maybe I was wrong, the boy whispered, barely audible. Mark saw the vulnerability behind Tyler's calm facade, the boy's own battle with doubt and fear. Mark wanted to lash out, to blame someone for this crushing setback. But all he could do was sit in the quiet pain, feeling the fragile bond between them stretch thin. The daughters clung to him tighter, sensing his broken spirit, while Angela the nurse offered gentle support, though she couldn't hide the skepticism in her eyes. Yet, even in the darkest moments, Tyler's presence was a stubborn ember. He refused to give up, quietly promising to keep searching, to keep fighting for the truth. Mark's heart wavered between despair and a reluctant flicker of hope, caught in a painful dance that tested every ounce of his strength. The setbacks didn't break them, but they carved deep scars, reminders of the harsh reality they faced. Still, beneath the weight of uncertainty, a fragile trust was beginning to root itself in Mark's heart, quietly growing stronger with each painful step. One chilly afternoon, just when Mark felt the weight of hopelessness crushing him again, Tyler burst into the hospital room, eyes bright with urgency. I found something, he said, voice trembling but determined. He pulled out a crumpled photo from his worn backpack, a snapshot of a woman who looked just like Emily, standing outside a small shelter in a neighboring town. Mark's breath caught. His heart hammered in his chest. Could this be real? For the first time in weeks, something tangible, something real. Tyler explained how he had been following a pattern, a trail of small clues hidden in overheard conversations, discarded letters, and the kindness of strangers who knew a woman matching Emily's description. He hadn't told Mark before because he wanted to be sure. Mark's eyes welled up as the nurse, Angela, stepped closer, her skepticism softening into hope. "We have to go," Mark whispered, a mixture of disbelief and determination shaking his voice. Together, they rushed to the shelter. The cold air bit at their faces, but Mark barely noticed. When the door opened, Emily was there, worn, fragile, but alive. Their eyes locked, and in that instant, the years of pain, fear, and doubt melted away. Tyler's impossible offer had become a miraculous reality. Tears streamed down Mark's face as Emily reached out, weak but smiling. The nurse gasped softly, overwhelmed by the moment's raw power. For Mark, it was the breakthrough he had prayed for. Proof that hope, even when buried deep, could rise again. In the days that followed, Mark and Emily began the slow, careful process of rebuilding their life. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale. There were scars, both visible and hidden, that needed time and patience to heal. Emily's strength was fragile, but her spirit flickered with newfound hope. Tyler stayed close, quietly becoming a part of their story, a reminder that sometimes family comes in unexpected forms. The nurse, Angela, who had once doubted, now carried a gentle smile whenever she checked in on them. She saw firsthand how love and resilience could breathe life back into even the most broken hearts. Mark's company remained a constant source of stability, but more importantly, he became a man changed by the experience, humble, grateful, and fiercely protective. Emily's laughter, though soft and rare at first, began to fill the rooms that had once echoed with silence. They knew the road ahead would be long. Therapy sessions, whispered conversations about fears and dreams, quiet moments of doubt, they all belonged to their journey. But beneath it all, the foundation was solid. A family reunited, scars acknowledged but not defining them, hope rekindled without illusions. And every night, as Mark tucked Emily into bed, he whispered, "You're home now, we're together." It wasn't just a promise. It was the truth that anchored them, a truth that no setback or shadow could ever erase. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to smash that thumbs up and hit subscribe for more unforgettable, emotional, and viral true stories. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from?